So you're about to start researching focus question 1, and it's quite an intricate one because it is a how, which relates to a process. So you need to talk through the process that was created here. So we're just going to break it down, and this is a skill you need to do for the rest of the focus questions. So by the end of this, you'll understand how to unpack a focus question. You'll know what to look for in a question, how to identify the core concepts, and then understand how those 3 things will guide your research. So this is our question, but we need to break it into the parts that exist in there. So there are 3 parts. The first is we need to talk about feudal system in England. We need to look at the spread of the plague, and we need to put those 2 together by looking at how one contributes to another. So there's actually 3 things you need to look into in order to answer the one question. So we'll break it down. Part 1, just looking at the feudal system, but what about it? Well, we need to know how did the feudal structure prior to the plague coming influence society. So you need to be into that, the before section, because when you look at contribute, you're going to be guiding into the effect. So feudal structure, we need to look at what is the role of each level, what were the responsibilities of each level, which levels interacted with each other, because that will give you the influence. You know who's doing what, how those are connecting, and therefore what impact is that having. Part 2 then is an easier one. We know the plague was spread. We know that there was the fleas, there was increased trade, there was the connection of those worlds through trade, which meant that there was more interactions between your peasants and your merchants. We knew that there's overpopulation, and that led to poor hygiene, and we know they had a lack of medical knowledge. But none of these at this stage link really clearly to the feudal structure. So we need to put these 2 together. We need to look at how part 1, roles and responsibilities, contributed or influence and impact the spread. This is why you need to break it down. To make that connection, you need to think, what is each level doing in their daily life, who is interacting with who, and then how are those 2 things increasing their exposure to the plague. Very simply, which social level died first? Why? Really strip it back. If you're still stuck, go to this. What do we know about the peasants? They had the poor health, they lived in poor conditions, they were working really hard, and they were the ones that were interacting. They were at the bottom level, so they had the greatest interaction with each other. If one person got the plague, it was very likely somebody else next to them would get it. Well, what do we know about traders? They were the ones traveling. So they were coming from the east to the west, and then they were bringing it from western ports into other countries. They also interacted with the peasants at the ports. What do we know about the church? Well, they didn't live with the peasants. They lived in the church, so there was some isolation. But they also provided assistance. They provided burial rites. They held mass. They tried to cure the sick. And in that way, they did interact with society. What do we know about kings? They didn't interact as much. A king wasn't working the land. He had servants and peasants to do that. So while the plague was, yes, you could die as a king, you had less exposure to it. So now you need to go and prove that. You need to look at all the concepts we've just gone through, and you need to prove how our feudal system and the interactions and roles and responsibilities led to allowing the plague to spread. I hope this has helped you to get started.